Good morning and shalom, everyone. So this is the crowd that didn't hear the message about finances last week? Because it's full. Okay. Okay. My message the second time, this session will remain basically the same, but I want to come from another angle. So if you were here earlier today, you're not going to fall asleep on me. Oo'Mofet, yeah, that's the name of the ministry I lead back home. It does mean a sign and an example, and this is because we are aiming, my team and I, to the very broken places in the hearts of humanity. God brings our way the margins of the margins. You know, in Old Testament, the widows and the orphans and the aliens were those who really depended on others to provide their daily bread. They had nothing. Basically, they would have been sold to slavery unless people would really help them. But when you take that very brokenness in their lives, in your lives, in anybody's lives, in the lives of Israel, and you allow God to touch those places, you end up with amazing stories of signs and examples. So our ministry is not about signs and wonders, not that I have anything against it, but that's not our calling. It's about taking the very thorny, crooked parts in our lives and allowing God to fill them with glory. And boy, amazing, amazing. And God loves that, right? Because we're weak. He is strong. So, I want to start with you today in Psalms 122. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. I'm sure everybody here knows this verse very well, and I'm going to mess it up a little for you. But before we go to Psalms, I want you to check with me the same phrase in Jeremiah. Jeremiah 15. Jeremiah 15, 5. It's one of those weeping, lamenting songs of the prophet. And he says, "Who will have pity on you, O Jerusalem? Who will bemoan you? Who will turn aside to ask how you are doing?" And this is what I'm after, how you are doing. That same phrase, "who will ask how you are doing," is mistranslated in Psalms 122 to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Let me just get there. What is the difference? When you think all you have to do is pray for the peace of Jerusalem, then it's kind of a checklist, you know, okay, pray for my children, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, God, may there be peace in Jerusalem, next. But if you have to ask, how is Jerusalem doing, you have to get involved, okay? There's a difference there. And the accurate translation should be in Psalms 122, ask, how is Jerusalem doing? And by the way, I don't think a lot of peace is going to be in Jerusalem soon. So kind of, you know, those prayers that really are not answered, you know, God, may there be peace in Jerusalem, they're not accurate. They're not hitting the target. It's not about praying that there will be peace. We would love to have peace. You know, we greet each other with shalom, peace. That's our first word when we meet anybody, because we crave for peace. But that's not what God is calling you to do. So if you're a lover of Israel, if Israel is on your heart, what God wants you to do is to ask, how is she doing? And that means you have to develop a relationship with Israel. That takes work. Amen. Okay? So how are we doing? Well, thanks for asking. We are under judgment. We are under severe punishment. The God who loves us so much, the God who looks over the globe, the earth, and we are in his eyes, you know, we are the apple of his eyes. You try to look into God's face, into God's eyes, you have to see Israel. If you don't, then it's not his face you're looking at, because we're right there at the apple of his eye. That very God is so angry with my nation that he is hiding his faces from us. And let me take you to Isaiah 6. Let's go there now. Isaiah 6 is an amazing story, because the prophet has a unique opportunity there to see the glory of the Lord filling the temple in a very distraught time for the nation. And he is all excited about what he sees, and he wants to go tell everybody, all his companions, that this is how God's glory looks like. And the glory is so amazing there that even the seraphim had to cover their eyes. They cannot look. There's some aspects of God's personality and revelations that only Yeshua, only Jesus can look into. Even the angels cannot look into his glory without covering their eyes. The cherubim on the ark, they had to cover their eyes. They could not look at his glory directly. The only one who can see all of God's personality aspects, all of his faces, is the Messiah, his son, which is why he says, you want to see the Father? Then look at me. I look at the Father, I know what he does. Look at me, you know what he do. So if we, as a nation, I'm talking on behalf of the Israeli nation, if we want to see all the faces of God, we have to see his son. But he is hidden from us, and therefore we cannot see a lot of God's personality. So there in Isaiah 6, he sees the glory of the Lord. He is totally aware of his sin. God takes care of that. And then, yes, Isaiah wants to go out and tell everybody what he saw. And he even says in verse 8, he hears the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And Isaiah says, here am I, send me, let me go and tell everybody how amazing you are. Go. But then God says to him, and I mean, this is heartbreaking. He says, you go and tell the people, you're not going to tell them about my glory. You go and tell them. You will hear, keep on hearing. You will not understand. You will see, but you will not perceive. You go, he says to Isaiah, you make the hearts of these people, of this nation, dull, and their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their ears, and hear with their lest they see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and understand with their heart. Why? Because then they may return and be healed. And I don't want them to return and be healed right now. And Isaiah is devastated. So he says, Lord, how long? Until when? He cries out. And God says, until. And then comes the list, and it describes the history of the nation of Israel in the past 2,000 years and even more than that. Until the cities are laid waste and without inhabitant, and the houses are without a man. Diaspora. The land is utterly desolate. The Lord has removed men far away. He has taken an entire nation and plucked us out of our land. And the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land. And then Isaiah says, until when they will not get it? They will hear, they will see, and will not get it. And God says, until everything is desolate, and then a tenth will be in it. And then restoration starts, and he describes, until the end of the chapter, the beginning of the restoration of Israel. But we are there. This is where we are in history, okay? Isaiah prophesied it so many centuries ago. Today, we stand in verse 13 of that chapter. We have, it's not exactly a tenth, not yet, we're getting there, but since 1967, the restoration of Jerusalem to the hands of Israel, the messianic body is becoming an entity. Up until that point, more or less, Jews who were saved and born again, they were called Hebrew Christians. They joined the Christian church. 1967 is a turning point in history by all means. And the clock, the historical clock that started ticking when Israel was established as a nation about 20 years later, paces much faster, and the messianic body is born and growing since then. Okay? And this is verse 13. The body in Israel is growing today. It has a lot of childhood diseases, a lot of issues, which is why you have to keep checking on us and ask how we're doing. The issues we dealt with severely 2 years ago are changing now. There's always something that requires the support, the help, the prayer of the Gentiles. And this is, I'm here to recruit you to that. And I hope you'll understand me by the end of the message. But right now we have a tenth, a very small remnant that starts turning back to God and daring to look at the face of his Messiah and say, hey, he's our brother. His name is not even Jesus. You know, that's too foreign to the Jewish ear. It's Yeshua. And Yeshua means salvation. He is our brother. He is a son of our nation. And when you look at him, boom, that veil is removed. And now you can get it about God. Things fall into pieces. The puzzle is complete. But that's only the tenth. The rest of the nation doesn't see it. And we're under that judgment because God said to Moses, before Moses died, Deuteronomy 33, he says 16, he says to Moses, they will cross the river, they will get into the promised land, and they will fornicate. They will worship the gods of the heathen nations. And then I will hide my faces from them. And just a little Hebrew lesson right here. The word faces doesn't appear as often in your translations as it is in Hebrew. The theologians or the translators, they didn't know what to do with the personality that was ascribed to the face, to the word faces of God. So they translated it into countenance or presence. The presence of God, God's countenance, my countenance will walk with you. These words are non-existent in Hebrew. It's always about God's faces. God will shine his faces upon us. And it's plural. It's not just one. God has many faces. I'm not talking about Son, Father, and Spirit. It's not about the Trinity. Faces meaning personality, traits, aspects. You Gentiles have a privilege to see many aspects of God's personality that we don't because they're not hidden from you. When you're born again, when you're saved, Jesus is a part of the package deal. You get it immediately. We don't. We don't. When we look at his face, when we dare to look at the face of Yeshua, it is covered with blood, and it's not necessarily his. It's the blood of history. It's a Jewish blood that was shed in his name. This is how we perceive it. I am 30 years in the Lord, and I'm still in that process. I'm a part of this 10th, and I'm still going through that process. It's definitely getting easier to me to see him as he is. You know, he used to be, when I got saved, Yeshua for me was a blonde Gentile riding a chariot in the snow. Kind of from the family of Santa Claus. He was anti-Semitic. Yeah, definitely not, Mediterranean. He was anti-Semitic, and on bad days, he was hanging on that wooden cross with a woman underneath it. I mean, it was just a mixture of things. We don't know the difference between Catholicism and, for us, it's everything. All is the same, and there's blood following him everywhere. Most of the persecution, today our enemies are Muslims, Muslim countries and terrorists. But in the Israeli mind, the biggest enemy is what was done to us in the name of Jesus. So when God starts revealing his faces to us and luring us to himself one by one by one, it is a revolution to realize that this enemy is really compassionate towards me, that this is the way to see God. It takes repentance. I still find myself repenting for finer layers of deception that I was raised up upon, that he is my enemy, that it is an abomination to my nation to follow him. So I didn't prepare for that, but do you remember where the proverb of the sower is? Mark 4? Matthew 30. I think I like the one in Matthew. Yes, that's the one I wanted. I just want I want you to realize what that hidden faces of God is. It's a phrase, the rabbis use it, it's in the Bible. God prophesied that because we will fornicate against him, once we enter into the land, he will hide his faces from us. We will not see them. And we are under that judgment. If you want to look at it for it at home, then look for countenance and presence and see what God says about it. And that time will go on until we're back in the land. And actually, the first time God says, I will hide my face from them no more, is Ezekiel 39. And this is the end of times. Until the end of times, the Jews as a nation will not be able to see what you see so easily. We are under that judgment. So even when Yeshua walks on earth, he performs all these miracles. I mean, my goodness. We wished it was like that. We don't get it as a nation. They got healed, they got miracles, but they didn't get saved. Because when you get to the cross and they're there in the little upper room, there's not a multitude there of disciples, just 120. They didn't get saved in big numbers until he was crucified. Only later it starts. And then everywhere he teaches, he uses parables. So I always thought parable was a way to make a spiritual truth, closer to your heart. You know, he uses agricultural and symbols from the lives of fishermen so they could understand it. No, that's not the point. Those parables are not there to make the truth clearer. On the contrary, verse 10, we're in Matthew 13. The disciples came and say to Yeshua, why do you speak to them in parables? You speak to us clearly. Why do you speak to them in parables? And he answers and says, because it has been given to you to know. Now you Gentiles, listen to that, because that's for you. It has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. But to them, to the Jews, it has not been given. For whoever, I know he's speaking here to Jewish disciples, but that principle applies today to you. For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. So he took more from the Jews. The more we didn't get it, the more he took away from us the ability to see. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because seeing, and he repeats here Isaiah's words, seeing, they do not see. Hearing, they do not hear. Now they understand. And in them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, and now he quotes it. Hearing you will hear, you will not understand. Your hearts will be dull, your ears hard, your eyes will be closed, lest they should see and hear and be healed and repent. And he does not want us right now to be healed and to turn back to him. I mean, God does want it, but in his plan, once he turned his face away from Israel, you are here seeing his face. So it's either or. This is your time, Gentiles. And when your times will be fulfilled and he will hide his face no more again from Israel, guess what? Guess what? So make the best out of that, because we know the time is running out. You get it. We don't. He goes to a Samaritan village. He doesn't even have to perform a miracle. He just says to her something, that Samaritan woman, something about her past. The whole village is excited about him. He didn't even have to work harder and perform miracles. They didn't exhaust him, those Gentiles. The Jews did. He had to go to the mountains later and just recuperate, you know. But he did perform all those miracles. And it happens today, the same thing. Yes, we don't see a lot of healings in Israel, but there are so many miracles he performs on our behalf. I mean, just the birth of our nation. And the way he saves us in wars, that logically there is no way, just no way we can win them. I mean, ask Dish is so fascinated with these stories in Hampton. Just ask them to tell them some of those war stories. It's like, you know, all the Arab countries are against us. We play Lego because that's all we have. We have one tank in the entire nation, and we win. It's a miracle. And we have enough wars going on every decade to prove that miracle, that truth again and again. You know, God provides us fresh testimonies every decade. So we don't get it. We don't see that. We don't see his grace. We don't see his personal desire to have a relationship with us. How do we see it? 67, again, that timeline, when Jerusalem is restored to Israel, when the messianic body is being established, something else very interesting is happening. Evangelical Christians start touring the Holy Land. Until then, it wasn't really safe. Well, it's always a challenge. But there wasn't much to see because it was so narrow. It was a war zone. It's not anymore, by the way. Don't believe those news. It's fascinating to travel there. It's amazing. But 1967, up until then, most of the pilgrimage, Christian pilgrimage to Israel is Catholic. They come to see those dead stones. And I really couldn't care less if it's in Israel or Alaska. I just happened to be there. But in 67, evangelical Christians start touring the land, and they put it together. They understand that the modern things, that history is being made right there in front of their eyes, and prophecies are being fulfilled. And they travel, and they leave such an impact on the nation. Because you go to restaurants, and you go to hotels, and you have all those tour guides. And why do you flood this country? Why do you come here? And the answer is, your God is our God. What do you mean? And then relationships are being created, and stories are, and you live that impression. If you have no other reason to come to Israel, come for that. Come to show your face to a Jew. A couple of months ago, I visited a hotel in Jerusalem, and I see a group of Amish pastors there. Now, Amish don't travel. They don't fly. It was really, we've never seen Amish in Israel. So I approached them and talked to them a little, and I was so touched. And actually, I recalled hearing in the news that there was a group of Amish coming. And he told me, one of their pastors, he said, the older generation has died. And so we're more flexible now. We were not allowed to fly. We could only go by boat. And now we decided we can fly to certain places, and especially to the Holy Land. And we're here for 1 week, and we're going to walk in the streets of Jerusalem and say to people that come our way, we are sorry for what Christianity did to you in the name of our Messiah. He is your Messiah. And it was so shocking that they spoke about it on the news. The camera followed them. It softens our hearts. We may not be born again right there. Don't expect that to happen when you walk in the streets of Jerusalem. It may, but that's not the point. God may not want to use you to save my people, but to soften our hearts. And I want to take you from here to the book of Ruth, because that is really where I think you can find your identity concerning Israel. Because what do we have in the book of Ruth? We have really a parallel there of two widows, and that's the essence of the book. It's not about the church relationship with her Redeemer, I believe. It's mostly about the relationship of the church with Israel. Ruth, the Gentiles who know the Redeemer, and Naomi, the Jewess, who is just coming back to the land from diaspora, just like my people. Both of them are widows. Both of them have no one to lean on, which is the definition, the biblical definition of a widow in Hebrew is not just a woman. that lost her husband. It's also Israel or Zion, Jerusalem, when she has nobody to lean on. That's the broader definition of the word widow. So God promises that the day will come when Israel will not remember the reproach of her widowhood anymore, because she will call him Ishi, my personal lover, and not just my master. Right now, yeah, we realize there is, if we do believe we're God, the majority of Israelis are secular. We do believe there is God, but he is a master. He does what he wants. There's nothing personal between him and us. The days will come when that reproach will be removed from us, and we will not be a widow anymore. But right now we still are. So we have those two widows in the book of Ruth. And one of them is coming back to her land, just like Israel. The other one joins her. Now, Ruth, she would have no right to go to Bethlehem. She would have been sent back. I mean, maybe she would be stoned if she would have showed up in those fields without being connected to Naomi. Just like you Gentiles. You have no right to come to the fields of your father unless you realize it is the widowhood of the Jewish nation that turned his face towards you. Okay? Because God didn't start with the New Testament. That's not the beginning. So, she comes back to the land, and she is, as far as she is concerned, she will die with her people, but all she can hope for is some harvest at the end of the day that maybe somebody will glean for her. I'm talking about Naomi. Naomi's name means pleasant. So when the women of Bethlehem see her, they're not sure this is her. She's been through difficult years. She lost her husband. She lost her kids. And she says, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara. Look at the pictures of Jews returning to Israel from Russia, from Ethiopia. You see that. You can't really, are you a Jew? I definitely cannot call you pleasant. You see the suffering on their faces. Everything pulls down, you know. She says, no, don't call me Mara. Don't call me Naomi. I'm not pleasant. I'm bitter. This is how my nation is like now. We're bitter. But there is this one person that loves us enough, one body that loves us enough to be with us, to walk that way with us. Ruth means friendship, to be our friends, to fellowship with us. Day in and day out, Ruth goes to the fields, risks her reputation at one time when she goes to the feet of the Redeemer, not knowing what's going to happen. You know, sometimes unsafe things could happen to women at the threshing floor. She does that on behalf of Naomi. She goes and does what Naomi instructs her to do. And gradually, she softens her heart. So this is your place on behalf of Israel. When you ask, how is Jerusalem doing? See, it's not about you just saying, may there be peace in Jerusalem, because that puts you out of the equation. And you do have a place there. It's about you asking, how is she doing, and where can I glean on her behalf this morning? And what is it that she needs? Barley or wheat? Or it's about taking care sometimes of her basic needs in the midst of her bitterness. In that story, we have another widow, Orpah. Orpah was the daughter-in-law of the other son of Naomi who died. Orpah means a neck, a back. She walks a certain distance with Naomi, but she gets tired of her at a certain point, or maybe the life in Moab, back home, are more appealing to her. So she turns back, she weeps, she cries, you know, she really loves Israel. Many Gentiles really love Israel until they face our bitterness, and it is exhausting. It is exhausting. But this is time in this is where we stand now in history. Naomi is bitter, and she needs Ruth because she does not have a direct access to the Redeemer. He is present in the story from the beginning, Boaz. He knows she's in town because the reapers told her, the guys in the field told him about that. He knows she's in town. He doesn't approach her directly. He is hiding his faces from her. But he does reach out to her through, Boaz has a plan for Ruth there, right there. He uses her to soften Naomi's heart, but he's not doing it directly. Naomi knows Boaz exists. She doesn't approach him either, because this is the time in history. I can't wait till the day that he will reveal his faces and we will see him in his glory and we will know this is the one we have pierced. This is the one we have provoked. So what is your place on behalf of Israel until then? How are you to usher that in? Now, when I'm standing here and talking, it's not to a church. I'm talking to each one of you individually. Each one of you has a responsibility towards God on behalf of Israel. It's not about you and Israel. It's about you and his faces. We don't see him directly, but we see him through you. I was saved, I was led to the Lord in South Africa while I visited there through a family of Gentiles who showed me something about God's faces that blew my mind. And it was a personal relationship with God. I could not believe this is possible. And I saw that. And I also saw, I stayed a few months with them. After I got, it took me 3 weeks to be convinced that God exists. And then I stayed a few months with them. And I could see how they really live their faith. It was about the way they took care of blacks. And back then, South Africa was all about apartheid. You know, white would walk on the white side of the street, the blacks would walk there. And this family had relationships with black people. And I could see them fighting with each other, their husband and wife, but then dealing with it through forgiveness and repentance. I come from a very proud, stiff-necked nation. You don't ask anybody to forgive you. If you use the word forgiveness, slicha, it's in the context of, please make a way for my cart to move because you're standing in my way. You know, please forgive me, or forgive me, what time is it? But we just narrowed down that word, made it shallow, and they forgave. They changed in front of my eyes, and I realized God says, and he means it, and it works. It works. They took verses and breathed life into it by showing me how it works every day. That's how I got saved. And I'm telling you, this was the hardest time in my personal history. That was a crisis. I'm a single mom, and I conceived my son outside of wedlock. That was the second crisis, but it was nothing like the crisis I went through when I realized this Yeshua is my Messiah. It took me months to allow that truth to sink into my heart. I had no doubt I'll get to the airport back in Israel and they'll send me away and I will lose how are they going to know that it didn't matter. It made no sense. I thought I'm losing my nation, my heritage, that I stopped to be a Jew. And it was really hard. It was real. I couldn't ignore what happened, but I didn't want that. And God used their faces again and their love and their relationships to soothe me and to get me back to my Jewish roots through my faith. What happened to me back in South Africa happens to many Israelis. Most of us get saved through a Gentile. It's like God is taking us out of Israel, sending us to the nations. You know, all of us serve in the army. Every Israeli has to serve in the army. My mom is here. She served in the IDF. Well, not in the past 10 years, but she did. And when the army service, and my sister is here and she did her army service, all of us serve in the army. So we either serve or we have our children there or our fathers. There's always somebody there. But when the army service is over, we're so, we just need a break. from that life, and we travel the world. We go to the Far East, we go to Latin America, we go where it's cheap, and we can live there for a year just to get off all that we have seen in the battlefield. God saves us there. He takes us, it's an amazing system, but he takes us to those nations, and somehow relationships are being created. People all over the world are fascinated with the fact that, I didn't know the family who took me in South Africa. It was a tiny little place in the middle of nowhere. They heard an Israeli is there. They asked me to come and live with them. And I thought, yeah, I'll take advantage of that. And I did. And I just made them promise me that when I want, they take me back to the airport, and that's all I needed. I had a roof and food provided. It happens to many of us. And then we see God's faces. So who are you on behalf of Israel? Where is your heart towards Israel? What does Israel see? An Israeli passing your way, a Jew that crosses your path, or when you visit Israel? What? And I want to challenge you and to tie it in with the fruit of the Spirit. We are not looking for we do want the gift, but hey, Yeshua walked on my tiny piece of land and performed more miracles than the entire nation needed, and we still didn't get it. So it's not so much about signs and miracles, it's about softening our hearts. And what does it is seeing those fruit being produced in you. Patience, long-suffering, humility, peace. Peace, peace. It's our daily bread. We need peace. The word peace is so amazing in Hebrew. It also means complete and whole. And when you come to us, we don't want you to pretend you are not who you are. Be who you are, but show us how God touches those broken places in your lives and turns it into a testimony that no one else can create other than God. Then we start turning from being a Mara to Naomi. We start becoming pleasant again, and eventually the day will come that we will recall, just like Naomi did, hey, I have an inheritance. I have a land. I have rights. I can go to him alone, on my own, and I will be redeemed. Ruth did not redeem Naomi. You cannot redeem Israel. You can show us the path to the only one who can do that. And we need you for that. We really do need you for that. So before I pray for you, I want to tie it in with the work we do in Israel. As we collect testimonies of signs and examples to who God is, we restore that widowhood, that brokenness, that orphanhood in the hearts of people who were severely wounded. Sometimes I work with Arab, Palestinian women, and their life stories are worse than any I've ever heard. Because on top of an abusive husband and a system that is not really in their favor, there's a whole tribe that they have to answer to. It's really complicated to lead them to restoration until you get to God. And he just loves it. The more complicated it is, the more of his faces he can show in the process. Okay? So you're welcome to pray for me, for my team, to join hands with us, to keep in touch. Because I can report you of those little stories that need your prayer. And to take part in the restoration of Israel. But I also encourage you to actively seek God's faces. Faces, it's always faces. And ask him which part of his faces, which aspect of his faces he wants to imprint in you in such a way that people will not be able to ignore. Usually, you will find out it's one of his names. God has so many names, and each one of his names teaches about something about his character. It will be one of his names, maybe two, that he will give you such a revelation of and will weave it into your life story, and the testimony will be there. And we cannot ignore those things. We love hearing testimonies. I'm sure everybody does. It builds our faith. It softens our hearts. So, Abba, in the name of Yeshua, in that mighty name that is above all other name, I stand before you now, God. And I ask you to write your names on the hearts of the people here. It may be a corporate name for this precious church. It may be a name for each one present. And I ask you, Father, to make that part of your face so clear to each one that it will just shine forth, that they will not be able to resist sharing it with others. I also ask you, Lord, to create relationships with Israel so they can check on her and see how she's doing and what part of that face she needs to see. Lord, it's amazing to me how the disobedience of one family led a Gentile to the family of Israel. How the disobedience of my nation leads the Gentiles into your presence. And I ask you to close that circle and use the obedience of the Gentiles present here to open and soften the heart of my nation. Thank you, Abba. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Father.
Chiackamauga GA.